I'm going to play you a clip of your own show, Bomber. Yeah, because that's how we roll. Here's this really cool show. We try and emulate ourselves like this because this is the number one political podcast in best country in the world or something. I don't know what the build up to it is. But having a chat with Mr. Hooton yesterday, and we talk about the debt that John Key incurred, that he decided to put it up by about 50 billion. People talk about Jacinda, right? And they talk about Jacinda Ardern's government ruining this country with debt. Well, under her government, our debt grew by 25 billion. Right, from about 75 billion to about 100 billion. Under John Key, it grew by 50 billion. And no one ever says that. And we don't know why. I mean, yes, with the earthquake, that's a part of it, but not 50 billion. We had a pandemic and keeping people alive and keeping businesses open. There's a result for what that was. Matthew Hooton yesterday started talking about this. And I just think because he is, fair to say, a conservative commentator, how would you place him in the world of politics, Bomber?
Nihilist.
Okay. And he kind of spells it out, and he spells out what Cullen did, and etc. And I think it's worth us listening to someone else talking about it and having to say what they've got to say.
So she'll get away with it all right. Sadly, of course, she'll be borrowing.
Sorry, this is talking about borrowing for the tax cuts. I left that part out. Borrowing for the tax cuts.
About $15 billion more in cash terms, in terms of issuing bonds, than Grant Robertson was going to over the next 3 or 4 years.
So you got that, borrowing more than Grant Robertson. You got that? That's the first thing to hear from Matthew Hooton.
She probably spend as much as Grant Robertson or more.
More, definitely.
More, certainly as a percentage of GDP. And she'll add to the borrow.
Just sorry, we've got to do this each time, Bomber. We see you, Rajan. We know you're watching.
Hey.
We see you. Now you're allowed to go and see Bomber. He can be stepdaddy, but you always have to come home. We see you. I'm just making people clear.
I mean, she was mentored by Bill English. I think this is important to remember. Bill English took over from Michael Cullen.
I didn't know that.
Michael Cullen had paid off the debt after Birch and so forth, and we got to zero debt.
Having been fun. This lefty loony kind of guy has got us to zero debt. What?
I love this. That this is pointed out, right? He paid down all of the debt after National. Remember, Labor, terrible at the economy. Always running up, just massive fucking debt, and you're not running the country like a household, you're spending too much money. Cullen paid it all off.
All of it.
And set up the Cullen Fund.
Yeah.
And then comes John Key.
Phenomenal.
John,
people still think that National is the money party.
All right.
English decided that things were so terrible, he ran 8 cash deficits in a row. As he never ran a cash surplus as finance minister, and he borrowed about 50-odd billion or 60-odd billion, depending on how you measure it. And that began. It did take him 8 years. Then good old Stephen Joyce ran a surplus. Grant Robertson ran a couple of them. And then Grant Robertson borrowed more in 4 years.
Was it 2? I thought it was only 1. I thought
maybe it was only surplus. 1. It was just 19. Brad.
We'll ask Brad.
He'll know. But basically, she believes in the slow incremental thing. You have a problem like an earthquake or a global financial crisis, and you just borrow a bit because things will come right. And Bill English has taught her that. And she feels that she'll be finance minister for 9 or 12 years, taking us through to 2035,
52,
and she'll have by that stage balanced the budget and got things back to where they should be, in her opinion.
So that was a really interesting point, actually, and I hadn't thought about this, and it's horrifying that the way she's functioning is like doing what she's doing now, but she's got 9 years to sort it out. But they're acting like they've got 3. The amount of things. Why the fuck are they fast tracking? If they're running their budget and their economy like they've got 9 years to level it all out, why are they fast tracking anything if they've got 9 years to do it all? Well, it was a really interesting point.
Morgan poll, that'll tell you exactly the reason why they're trying to ram shit through, because in barely 6 months they've become about as popular as puberty blockers at a MAGA rally. They are so deeply unpopular. They are just passing crazy stuff that people who didn't vote are looking at this going, oh, I wish I'd voted now. And people who voted National are going, oh, I don't think I should have voted National. There's a real turn against this government. And they haven't even implemented their agenda yet. I mean, wait until the actual craziness starts. and then go, oh, this is terrible. I think the June 8th protest marches around the country for the environment is going to be a real turning point.
Before we go on, Rajan wants us all to know that the working group is just Tuesday's BHN pre-show. So,
I'm merely an hors d'oeuvre.
Have we got enough? Have we got enough Patreon money in the kitty to buy sponsorship?
Oh, yeah, we can sponsor the working
by
group.
BHN.
Now the actual, I didn't set that up very well because I'm not a professional. But that was about borrowing for tax cuts. And it's an interesting conversation because say they're not borrowing for tax cuts, but they're borrowing for the groceries. I think they talked about the other week, for the nuts and bolts, for a few of the daily costs. And no one seems to be saying to them, so hang on, so you're not borrowing for tax cuts. So that's coming from the kitty. Got it? But you are borrowing from day-to-day things, which are also coming from the kitty. So if you weren't doing the tax cuts out of the kitty, there'd be money in there not to have to borrow for the daily groceries from the kitty. Is that right? Because that's how it seems pretty clear to me. It's coming from the pool of money that we pay, and they're taking some out as tax cuts. And because there's not enough left to pay for the day-to-day groceries, they're having to borrow for that. So if they're uncomfortable for us to say they're borrowing for tax cuts, then I think it's pretty fair to say they're borrowing to enable tax cuts. I think that's a pretty fair thing to say. I mean, I think they're borrowing for tax cuts, but if they want to accept that, they're borrowing for the little things to enable the ability to give tax cuts.
I think this semantics bullshit is going to be seen through about 30 seconds after they get out of the lockup. If they really have borrowed for tax cuts, against the advice of the IMF, against the advice of the OECD, then we actually do risk a credit downgrade. And if there is a credit downgrade, that will actually increase the amount of money that we have to pay for just the interest costs alone. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the interest costs, they're getting to the level where it's larger than what we're spending on education, health, and corrections combined. This is a real problem. And if we are borrowing this much for tax cuts, the market will react. I mean, Nicola Willis can tell us that, I'm borrowing $15 billion and we're giving away $15 billion in tax cuts, but they're different. She can play that game as much as she likes. If the market just goes, this is nonsense, the way they did over Liz Truss's UK budget, remember, when they tried to do the exact same thing, this 100%. Libertarian nonsense, this free market nonsense, it falls on its ass. And unless there's a sting in the tail, like an increase in GST to counter this, this government risks a credit downgrade.
Yeah. And for people, to make it really simple for people, imagine you've got a bank account with 3 or 4 different suffixes, right? It's all your money in 3 or 4 different suffixes. They say they've got enough money in the 00 account, which is where the tax cuts are coming from. But in the 01, there's not enough for groceries. So they're borrowing to the 01 account, the 01 suffix, to get the groceries. So that's not from the 00 suffix. But if you go to the actual bank account number, it's the same number. It's the same money. It's the same owner. Different suffixes. If you've got to buy for one of them, it actually impacts everything overall. It's a much easier way to think about it.
And that's what the market will determine very quickly. That's what she's done.